Morning. I'm going live this morning with Denu Tsegaye, who is the Ethiopian country director of Rainforest Alliance. I'm very excited to be talking to him this morning. I'm just going to pin my comment. No, it's disappeared. 1 second. Okay, let me find him. There we go. Thanks for bearing with me. We'll have him up soon. Hello.
Hi, Bonnie. Hello.
Hi. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to introduce you to everyone that's tuning in. You are the Ethiopian country director of Rainforest Alliance, and you are in international trade and sustainable agriculture expert. And so, yeah, thank you, Denu, for joining us. You're in Ethiopia, is that right now? You're calling from there?
Yes, I'm in Ethiopia. I'm based
Great.
in Addis Ababa, and thanks for the wonderful introduction, Bonnie.
Yeah, of course. So many people may not know that Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. And I would love to, if you could share a little bit about sort of what that means and how the country began to consume coffee, cultivate it, and sort of the story behind that history would be great to share.
Thanks for that, Bonnie. Yes, indeed. Ethiopia is known to be the birthplace of coffee Arabica, and the story goes more than 1,000 years when a goat herder called Kaldi have seen a strange behavior among his goat herders when his goats were grazing on a bush, and he found out that there is a very distinct behavior of those herders in terms of excitement, and later on he tried to discover what's going on, and then he found out that because of the shrubs that they were grazing, which happens to be coffee, is how coffee is discovered in Ethiopia. And later on, he tried to pick the red cherries and take it home and shared it with his wife. And of course, they don't know how to make coffee, but one of the suggestions they come up with is to share this strange fruit with monkeys in an area where they are living. And then the monkeys said that this is maybe devil's act, and they tried to burn the red cherries. And later on, they found out when the coffee is burned, there is some unusual aroma, and that's coming out of the burning coffees. And they said that maybe this is something that's sent to us by God, and they tried roasting coffee, and that's how it started to be consumed and cultivated in Ethiopia. So obviously, it was found in the forests, and it was growing wild. So this is the story behind how coffee is discovered. On top of that, Ethiopia's climatic condition offer a unique characteristics to growing coffee, and one of the finest and best quality of coffee is grown in Ethiopia.
Wow, okay, I didn't know that. So a goat led us to coffee in the end, basically.
Exactly.
That's amazing how, yeah, they basically noticed, as you said, the change in that animal, which obviously is now, coffee is such a kind of, obviously the caffeine of it, but so many other properties of it that we now know and love very well. I'd love also to hear then about how important the crop of coffee is to Ethiopia's economy, and then its importance. What does that how does that dictate the sustainability element too of the country and I guess the world? But how if there's a really reliant crop, and obviously change in climate, change in maybe how much crop is yielded each year can also be in partnership with that effect between the climate and the economy, and sort of how important is that to your country?
Yeah, so in Ethiopia, when we talk about coffee, we are talking about 15 million of farmers whose livelihood is dependent on growing and selling coffee. So Ethiopia is the fifth largest coffee producer in the world, and the largest in Africa. So you can guess how important it is to the national economy. In addition to that, to this, it contributes the lion's share to the country's export earning. So whenever there is an issue with the coffee sector, it also means that there is an issue with the economy as a whole. So to build a vibrant and equitable economy in Ethiopia also means that, those farmers who are relying on coffee for their livelihood has to be resilient, especially to the changing climatic conditions and also the challenges that they are facing with the price fluctuations and also disruption in the supply chains. So indeed, if the coffee sectors work well, it also means that the livelihood of those 15 million farmers will be improved, and we are also able to build a better economy. So it is very much connected, unlike many countries who might be producing, a small volume of coffee. For Ethiopia, it is a very important subsector, and that's why the government is also paying much attention and doing their best in terms of tackling the multifaceted challenges that the sector is encountered with.
Yeah, it's so important. It's good that the government sees and knows that's a huge sort of export, and how I'm sure every country's price of coffee is going to affect the sort of global price, or all the yields that country gives is going to, the economy of coffee in general globally will obviously constantly be shifting, and it's hard and important to make sure the livelihoods of the farmers can be stable, because however unstable a crop can be, their lives, they the same living conditions and the same sort of income, or a stable one. Which leads me on to, I would love to hear more about, I guess, the particular and unique practices of indigenous farmers within Ethiopia, and what makes their practices unique, and I guess what's important or what practices of theirs are important to kind of to nurture and make sure can continue to sort of be practiced, basically.
Yeah, as I've said it earlier, the vast majority of coffee producers are smallholder farmers who grow coffee on a small plot of area, or maybe, in their gardens. And this way of coffee production is also dependent on intergenerational knowledge and also experiences that they have developed from their ancestors who used to grow and cultivate coffee. In coffee production in Ethiopia, there is no use of chemical fertilizer to boost, the productivity level, as well as, pesticides that might be used, to fight against some of the coffee disease. This means, of course, the productivity will be very low. And what makes it very important here is that the way that coffee is produced, we in Ethiopia, basically we say that coffee is a tree itself that also loves another tree. So it's grown under shades. The shade is very important. So whenever we talk about, the tastes, the aroma, and the quality of coffee, it also directly connected with how a coffee is grown. So that way of growing coffee has given that distinct quality for Ethiopian coffee. So that skills and knowledge of cultivating coffee in such a way that it will not, goes against the quality is something that we need to nurture.
Yeah, and I think now obviously you can see images of coffee farms in a very different way, which is completely exposed by sun and just kind of turning over a crop sort of fast and quick, rather than, in harmony or in kind of a relationship, like you're saying, to these other trees that create the shade. The only coffee I've seen growing was when I took a trip earlier this year with Rainforest Alliance to Guatemala. And again, it was so interesting to see them growing under shade and just seeing how they can't exist without the other. It was really interesting. I would also love to know, do people, in terms of the smallhold farmers and families, would you say that, the generation now of maybe like teens into their early 20s are still interested in and engaged in continuing their families' kind of smallholding? Or would you say things can change that, like education or kind of the globalization of where we're currently at? Or I guess, is it passing on the family traditions?
Yes, indeed. It is something that is, very important when we talk about, passing this way of coffee production in Ethiopia to the younger generation. But unfortunately, what we are seeing among many users is that they are not interested with coffee production, primarily because of its suitability, as well as the profit that they might gain from coffee production. So as I've said, that the amount of coffee that farmers are harvesting from that small parcel of land is very low, and when it comes to livelihood, it's not offering really something that's required by the farmers. So the millennials, the users, are not anymore interested in coffee production, and that's why we are saying that there is a need for joint effort to tackle this problem in terms of modernizing how coffee is produced, application of modern techniques of farming, as well as good agricultural practices that will make the users to be very much interested in coffee production. If that's not going to happen, it is sad to say that maybe in the future we might not even find farmers that are growing coffee, because in Ethiopia maybe a single tree of coffee might be between 40 to 50 years old, and the same is true for the farmers. They are very old, they are aging, and there is a need for this knowledge, intergenerational knowledge and experience, to be passed on to the younger generation. But that definitely goes with making coffee to be vibrant, viable, so that the youth will be interested in cultivating coffee.
And I think what's so important in this moment is to see the connectedness of we as consumers, in terms of in Europe and the US, the culture around coffee consumption is very fashionable. It's very kind of desirable, and so many young people are getting into it. Yet you then look at the kind of that same generation, but where the coffee is grown, and how do you make that same like vibrancy and culture and interest towards it the same? And I think that goes back to, if you're a young person in Ethiopia, you would be more probably kind of feel safer about continuing that practice if you knew it was more stable. And I think that's why it's so important that there's certifications like the Rainforest Alliance that will help to make it a more stable kind of job to go into. And I think therefore, hopefully, that would potentially like make the choice to continue it.
Yes, indeed, that is absolutely what we are trying to do in Ethiopia. So, of course, making coffee sector to be profitable and very attractive to the young, it is important to make it more sustainable. So as Rainforest Alliance, when we talk about sustainability, it's all about application of good agricultural practices and modernization of businesses, so that the young generation can take coffee production as a modern business. And in doing so, we are also allowing for these certified volumes to have access to the market in the Europe, in the US, and also, an incentive that might also goes back to the producers, which is a mandatory premium that is paid as a result of this certified product. So through this process, we are, trying to make the young generation, as well as the coffee sector as a whole, to be very attractive.
Yeah, and seeing that as a solution. I think we so often, see and assume that consumption or farming of something is deemed negative, but obviously it can be a very positive solution for the land and people. And I think it's important to like view food systems like that and the livelihoods connected to them. I guess on the flip side of that, I read the article that was on Atlas Obscura about wild coffee forests in Ethiopia, and I'd love to learn a bit about that, and I guess how and why they're at threat. I mean, I think it was something like by 2080 there's 80 or 90% of those trees would no longer be there and be yielding coffee. So I'd love to hear about what is a wild coffee forest, and why are they so vulnerable, and how that affect the global economy, I guess, of coffee.
Yeah, so saying that Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee Arabica, it also means that the genetic resources for coffee Arabica exists in Ethiopia. So there are, for instance, about 2 of the 5 UNESCO recognized biosphere areas are located in Ethiopia, and these two places are also known for high coffee production. So it goes back to the economic viability I just talked earlier. So nowadays we see in some areas coffee producers, giving up on coffee and then shifting to production of other cereal crops or food crops. That means, cutting off trees and removing and loss of those diversity and ecological hotspots that are considered to be very important for having coffee Arabica in the world. So unless and otherwise there is something that we can do in terms of making, coffee very viable, especially, raising the consciousness of the consumers who need to know that how much effort does it take to produce coffee and to protect the environment, to conserve the biodiversity in terms of getting that finest and best quality coffee from its origin. So through this process, definitely we can avoid the potential risks of losing those ecologically diversified, as well as the hot spots of the Arabica coffee in Ethiopia.
And how can you sort of, is it protected, any of that land, in terms of like within reserves, or are there any kind of laws that protect it, or is the changes that are happening kind of ones that you can't really kind of go in and disrupt, because obviously you're not using like specific agricultural methods, or obviously you don't want to use the use of fertilizers and pesticides? Like, how is it protected, I guess, or is it something beyond your control, the effects?
Yeah, of course, in Ethiopia we do have a policy that doesn't allow any interference into the biosphere reserves that I talked about earlier, but that are only small parts of the coffee producing regions. So remember, I've said that like 85% of the producers are smallholder farmers who are growing coffee on their backyard. So there needs to be, a control over those individual householders in terms of keeping up with what they are doing, and also, not to give up on the coffee, but continue to protect their environment, to protect their shade trees, as well as continuing in coffee production. So, of course, there has been a lot of things that the development partners have been doing in the past, and as Rainforest Alliance, what we are trying to do is also to promote sustainable agricultural production that will also, boost the production and productivity of farmers, and also connect them with the consumers in Europe or USA, so that they feel that their efforts and all what it takes for them to produce coffee is recognized by the end consumers. And that is our goal, to connect the producers with the consumers, so that there is a mutual recognition in terms of the need of preserving this genetic resources of coffee.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love about Rainforest Alliance. It's sharing those resources. If you're able to share a particular practice with a farmer that's going to completely change or help the vulnerability of a crop, then that's, a shared resource of information. Or if you're, in conversation with another farmer, and then so many miles down the street, that practice that you learned maybe on that one farm can be shared with the other farm. I think it's being in that together, and having like an umbrella of a company or an organization like the Alliance that can help. And as you're saying, connecting with the consumer, which is obviously why we're in this conversation together. I think it's so many things. You can consume something, but you don't really think about where it's come from, and all the different lives that touches and affects when you consume something, which I guess isn't it interesting to really go into that now, I guess, as we as consumers, like, how do we, I think we all are becoming more and more aware of how our choices are highly impactful to people's lives, to the planet, and taking more of a responsibility on when it comes to that. But I'd love to know about, I guess, why is the Rainforest Alliance certification important for the livelihoods of the farmers and also the planet? And for those maybe I'll just also say that Rainforest Alliance has essentially a certification sort of label that can be on food, from coffee to bananas to chocolate, and it basically is a kind of stamp that looks like a sort of frog, and it basically says that it's kind of followed so many different rules of certifications that aren't only to do with the practices on the land itself, but also to do with the livelihoods of the farmers. So I'd love to know a bit about sort of why should we kind of follow that frog certification and what that means to the farmers.
Yeah, it means a lot to the farmers. Among these, the first would be, the skills and the knowledge in terms of, producing coffee and also modernizing the practices that has been practiced by many of the farmers in Ethiopia or all over the world. So primarily we promote sustainable agricultural production. And then after coffee is produced sustainably, it also means that what will be the incentive that needs to go back to the investment that is being made by the farmers in terms of, modernizing their way of production, conserving the environment, protecting the environment, as well as the ecological, keeping up with the ecological balances, so in doing so, there is also expectations from the producers in terms of getting compensated for the efforts and extra costs that it might require them for producing coffee in a sustainable way. So the label comes with the fact that coffee is produced sustainably. Farmers have used modern techniques of agriculture, climate smart agriculture, that is in harmony with the environment, and also the livelihood of the farmers here need to be also tackled in terms of the premium payment that comes back directly to the farmers so that they can send their children to school, and also some investments that are being made in terms of improving, building up, let's say that building up schools and hospitals or clinics in the rural areas where coffee production is going on. So it connects the people. When we say the people, it is both producers and consumers, and also with our planet in terms of conserving and protecting the environment. So the message behind the label is all this connectedness between sustainability and also the ability of coffee and better livelihood for the farmers.
Yeah, and I think too, for consumers, it can be pretty overwhelming to navigate your choices when you're trying to do as much as you can to lower your impact or be more conscious. And I think the beauty of certifications in general is that, serious amount of work has gone into what those certification means and all those things. So I think it's a system that works, and I think the best thing you can do is support it. And I think obviously there's so much I guess kind of ambiguous use of sort of like sustainability words and I guess essentially greenwashing. So I think it's important to read labels and to see where it's from. And I think I'm sure many people will read their bags and see it's come from Ethiopia. I know someone popped up in the comments and said that Ethiopia sounds like a coffee lover's dream, which it does.
Yes, indeed.
One day, hopefully, to come and visit and see the forests and everything. I'd love also to hear maybe both a challenge for smallhold farmers and then maybe like also a piece of hope, like a story that kind of has instilled hope from your work with Rainforest Alliance, just to show that kind of two sides, basically. If there's a challenge you can remember from a farmer and maybe a positive story.
Yeah, primarily it is a lack of modern skills and knowledge in producing coffee. So mostly farmers tells me that coffee is like it's like a child that really needs nurturing and great care from the time that it's grown on the farm, from the time that it's planted until it goes to the cup and consumed. So there is really a need for modernization of the coffee sector, which most of the farmers in Ethiopia lack. Like many countries like Brazil, we can say that coffee is produced in a very modern way in terms of production, harvesting, and processing. But that is what we lack in Ethiopia. So I would say that this is the major challenge because it is based on the intergenerational knowledge and experience. Second is vulnerability to climate change and also external shocks. For instance, whenever there is low prices of coffee in the global market, it directly affects the farmers. And also, you know, nowadays we are experiencing a very turbulent and erratic climatic conditions in Ethiopia. I'm very much impressed. You know, a couple of weeks I was in the field and talking to the farmers, and they were telling me that nowadays coffee is taking longer time to mature. And by that, what they are saying is that there is definitely, you know, there is a change in terms of weather that is required by the coffee plant to grow within the period of time it requires. So this exposure to the climatic conditions, to the changing climatic conditions, is the biggest challenge. And lastly, I would say that the market side inefficiencies in terms of, you know, long supply chains. There are quite large number of people being involved in coffee marketing. So that long chain and also the returns that comes to the farmers after selling their commodity, their crop, is very low. So these are the major challenges that I can say is constraining farmers in Ethiopia. And on the hope side, I would say that, you know, with Rainforest Alliance certification, what we are trying to improve is, of course, you know, the techniques and the methods of coffee production. In our standard, it is clearly identified that there is a step-by-step guide on, you know, modernizing the mechanism of coffee production. And all of our certified farmers are trained on these, you know, best practices of coffee production. And on top of that, of course, as much as we can, we are you know, trying to increase access to market for certified coffee from all over the world. And that definitely means that there is that incentive coming back to the farmers, you know, for producing their coffee sustainably. So this is the hope. And also the biggest hope that I have is also the consumers will have increased awareness and consciousness about how the efforts and what it takes for a farmer, let's say in Ethiopia, to produce their coffee, and also the need for connecting, you know, bridging between the producers and the consumers, so that, of course, nowadays we can't say that a cup of coffee is sold for low prices, let's say in US or in West, let's say in Europe. But unfortunately, that price doesn't directly come back to the farmers unless and otherwise there is, you know, a system that bridges between the consumers and the producers. So it gives me hope that if we are able to promote this system, we can tackle the challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, going back to the conversation we're in, I think that's what it's about. It's about like us taking on the responsibility and knowing that like we can be positive and conscious consumers and actually be benefiting to two sides of it, ourselves by the product we're having and the lives of the farmers and all the other people. You know, it's not just the farmers, but there's the people processing things, there's the people in the exporting kind of industry of having that shipped around the world. There's so many people involved in the kind of supply chain. And I think this year has been, I don't know, for me, I feel like we've all witnessed the interconnectedness of things, including food supply chains and where they're broken and where they're not quite sort of completely able to withstand big changes like we've experienced this year. So it just shows that like everything ripples down to lots of people. I would also love just to end a little bit going back to sort of the culture of coffee in Ethiopia. And I mean, I've experienced kind of a variation of the way that you drink coffee in Ethiopian restaurants, but I'd love to hear about how you particularly and uniquely prepare your coffee and enjoy it in Ethiopia to sort of end our conversation. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. I think the way coffee is consumed in Ethiopia is also quite distinctive. because, in the US or Europe, people go to the coffee shop and just grab their cup of coffee and go with it. But it's very different in Ethiopia. That starts from, roasting the coffee bean. So you start with getting the green bean itself, and you will roast it, you grind it there, and brew it in a kind of pot that's made from clay. So all this way of doing it is also very much attached to the culture of Ethiopia. And that's why we also say that even if coffee, Ethiopia is a major coffee producer in the world, that we also consume quite a lot of coffee in Ethiopia. So more than half of what's produced is also consumed locally. And one of it is the coffee ritual, the way that we prepare it, drink it, is I say that it is very much connected to our culture, because it also involves gathering of family members, where they come together, they talk to each other, after the coffee is brewed, there is also burning of incense, when it is even roasted. I realized once when I was in the rural area, when the family start to roast and coffee and make coffee, even children who are playing in the field will get the aroma of the coffee and gather together, and that will be the time that they will discuss about their day with the family members, and also exchange ideas. So coffee is indeed, we can say that it really consumes quite a long time to prepare it right there and drink it, which is usually takes 1 to 1.5 hours. But generally, it also have the positive side in terms of bringing together families, so that they can share ideas and information among each other, and they also discuss what they are going to do with the remaining of their time in terms of their activities on the farm. So it is uniqueness is also related on how we brew it. In Ethiopia, there is a unique way of brewing coffee, where we also add churned butter to coffee, and also some spices like cinnamon. That really gives it a very different taste to the coffee that we consume.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful thing to just imagine, bringing everyone in together and a moment for like reflecting on the day and storytelling and ideas. And I think we've obviously become so quick at the way we consume everything. It's like grabbing a coffee and being really quick. And I think that relates to, another side of things is just having the time to sit down and slow down and realizing the story behind it, which clearly the tradition has, either not been sort of communicated to the rest of the world, or sort of transferred or kept up. And I think it also I'm always so kind of aware that the way we consume things so quickly also creates a lot of waste, in terms of packaging and everything being on the go and always having to be moving. So I think it's important to slow down and sit down and kind of enjoy something that's taken so many things to get to the cup. So thank you so much for sharing everything about coffee in Ethiopia and the practices. And I really encourage everyone to check out Rainforest Alliance that I've pinned in the tweet, and learn a bit more about the certification, and follow the frog, which is a label that you'll find on coffee. And yeah, just be a bit more curious and ask questions about where your coffee is from. And I always think it's important too. I think so many people have like their favorite coffee store they go to, even just having the conversation with the manager or the barista at a coffee store to ask, like, do you know where your coffee comes from? And like,
exactly.
have any certifications or just the story behind it. I think the first thing we can do is ask those questions, because it's very important to.
Yeah, indeed. That will be the new way forward in terms of consumers, knowing where their coffee comes from, how it is, cultivated, produced, and processed. I think that is, what's going on in a majority of consumer countries. And thanks a lot for your time to discuss, to have this conversation with me, Bonnie.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure it's evening where you are. So have a good evening, and thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. You too. Have a great time. Bye-bye. Thanks, Bonnie. Bye.